Hello, good morning all. Here's another video showing an attempt to respond to unseen poetry. We'll start again with 25 minutes, and by the end of this we're going to hope to have a whole essay with a poem that again is generally unseen. And this one's from Liz Lockhead, who has come actually to two schools I've taught at, so apologies Liz if you're looking at this. At least this is my chance to see your poem now. Just to recap, the techniques that we've been using are writer, which is a generic AQA recommended acronym, I believe, via the Collins books, and talking to some great colleagues. I also consider the idea of having three different interpretations, perhaps moving from the literal to the metaphorical. Okay, each one showing different interpretations, and therefore prioritizing the alternative interpretation slant, which is something that you should be doing anyway. So let's look at the poem then. It only took us 1 minute to introduce. The mother is always two-faced. Wow, so there's clearly a twist to the expectation of mother being honourable to the child. At best, she wished you into being. Yes, it was cried. Yes, it was, she cried, at the 7 drops of blood that fell, staining the snow. 7 dwarfs. She who bargained crazily with fate for that long-awaited child, as red as blood, as white as snow. And when you came true, it was she who clapped her hands merrily, because she was happy as a queen could be. Interesting, what kind of queen? But she's always dying early. Oh my God. So often it begins to look deliberate, abandoning you, leaving you to the terrible mercy of the worst mother, the one who married your father. Oh, they can get some Freudian readings into here. She doesn't like you. She prefers all your sisters. She loves her sons. She's jealous of mirrors. She wants your heart in a casket. When she cuts the apple in two and selflessly takes the sour green half, she's good and glad to see you poisoned by the sweet red pulp. That's very interesting, the idea of the physical difference between the green and red, and the metaphorical difference between a mother who maybe does something to help her child, but actually ends up harming the child. Tell me, imperative, what kind of prudent parent would send a little child on a foolish errand in a forest with a brass basket jammed with goodies and wolf bait? Don't trust her an inch. So we're asking what kind of mother is it here? And clearly it's a metaphorical mother, the kind of mother that's represented in fairy tales, and I can't help but see in this wonderful CGP guide this extra bit of note up there. Okay, so it's taken me 3 minutes so far to look at this, and I will need to see 3 quotations. Well, I think the title break will be clearly the global idea, the notion of a mother figure that's loving, but loving in a way that's complicated. Then the idea of the pulp and the saving the mother, and then again the idea of the trust at the end. So I have some notes here that will form the basis of my 3 developments. We've got some interesting proper noun here, the worst mother. The worst mother here, some other techniques and language methods here. The similes there. Sensual, the birthing process. Okay, and rhetorical questions. Typo, delete the H. Okay. What do you think the poem is about? Is that an exam style question? Okay. How is the image of the mother represented here? Or how are mothers represented in this poem? So writer, mothers, the role of the mother is being questioned for her selfishness and the actual safety that she brings to her child. Imagery, the images of innocence, the imagery of selfishness, and these allusions to fairy tales there as well. Techniques, mention a few. The effect and the response is to complicate the representations of motherhood, and I think this is somewhat sardonic, but it's also dark at the same time. Okay, so 20 minutes now. Let's look at this here. So, Lockhead presents motherhood as something both complicated and selfishly human. And again, if you look at one of the Illuminate articles I've recently written, this adjective here shows innate analysis. Okay. The title is surprisingly flows with jarring enjambment, into the mother. Oops, a daisy, it's got to be capital, surely. Yeah. No. Is always two-faced. This colloquial language, there we go, seems to be childlike and immature there, and therefore contrasts or no, undermines the attempted authoritative tone of wisdom. It is presumably attempting to establish. Okay. This tone foreshadows the attack on motherhood that the poem appears to be on the first reading. Okay, so I've got two sentences of analysis there mentioning tone, and I'm going to see it. However, exclaims yes, which to acknowledge that mothers have to pay a physically painful price for motherhood. The sensual imagery represented in the repeated similes referring to the stark colors of red and white show how there is a naive innocence, perhaps expected, of mothers. That may be okay, people. So I'm just typing here out, talking about my thoughts. So I've represented the idea of the connotations of red and white. How white is innocence. I've implied that red is passionate, but I'm not going to say it. And that may be the passion and danger of, whoops, it does even say red, of danger of red blood. Symbolizes the innate human interests of mothers that are meant to be subsumed when motherhood is attained. This reading is given credibility, further credibility by focusing, I like double S's on that, but let's do the single S. By focusing on the unusual, potent, well, I can't really think of my adjective to describe there, it's the adverb crazily, on the emotional adverb crazily when the mother metaphorically bargains with fate. I'm not entirely sure that that's the language used in there. So I place some square brackets and deconjugate the weaving of that evidence. Okay, so I've introduced an idea with some language, but I really need now to place my hyphen and then to really embed this idea in this paragraph. Whatever is causing the mother to be two-faced, whoopsie-daisy, two-faced, it is clearly something, is it clearly? Clearly often means that it's not clear. It is clearly something that involves being in an altered state of being. This altered state of being is developed. There you go, so we've got about enough time, we've had about 5 minutes or so on that paragraph. This sort of state of being is developed later in the poem by the connection to the strange reference to the mother dying early. Okay, computer says no. Something she is always prone to do. Now I wanted to leave the always off to show how much it is, which clearly shows, then clearly again, which highlights that this is metaphorical death, perhaps. This allusion to folktale mothers who abandon their children. Is initially is a complication of the diligent mother wrong that is expected by both children and society at large. Indeed, the proper noun reference to worst mother seems to take this offensive superlative being here by worst, and sardonically mock this implicit criticism of mothers who are perhaps either not perfect for their children, or, let's read this again. Indeed, the proper noun reference, worst mother, seems to take this offensive superlative and sardonically mock this implicit criticism of mothers who are perhaps either not perfect for their children or who dare to have self-interest outside of motherhood. Okay. She doesn't like you. She prefers all your sisters. She loves her sons. She's jealous of mirrors. She wants to take your heart in a casket. Okay then. Now it's an opportunity to speak about structure here, and I haven't thought structure so much out here so far. But usually I find the second paragraph is a nice place to place structure in because it's going to be after the productive quotations I've placed here. The structure I can see here is irregular, with no rhyme and lots of run-on sentences. Here, though, there are two stark, conjoined, solo sentences after each other. Okay, then. So the stark, I think I've got another stark, the two two lines placed after the criticisms of the mother, and then I just need to analyze, to reference this. Jealous of mirrors, jealous casket. Jealous casket. Contrast the flowing, irregular structure so far throughout the poem. Now we need to talk about why the structure might be like this. And so far we can see that this childlike, immature tone that criticizes mother, that alludes to mothers negatively throughout folk tales, almost seems to be grasping here at more metaphorical diatribes against what mothers could be like. So given that the immature voice established at the start and heart of the poem has been railing against mothers without given structure, perhaps symbolizing the incoherence, the ignorance, incoherence of such thoughts. The poet's implicit criticism of the ignorance, coherence of such thoughts. Wow, massive phrases there. Let's read that again. Given that the mature voice established at the start and heart of the poem has been railing against mothers without giving structure, perhaps symbolizing the poet's implicit criticism of the ignorant incoherence of such thoughts, these two self-contained lines seem to portray that the voice is maybe scrabbling for understanding as to why mothers are so poorly, should be so poorly considered. Now, 5 minutes left. I'm aware that I haven't actually seen the final development of the poem, and I want to move on to the idea of trust. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the idea of trust and then end on the idea of the pulp. Okay then. This criticism, this undermining, I've got that word again, undermining of the voice's attacks on motherhood seems to resolve somewhat in a final rambling rhetorical question about why children are treated as wolf bait. Again, a childish, colloquial image, perhaps intended to suggest that the poet does not agree with the voice's attitude. I want to get some readings inside here, but we want to talk about the idea of the pulp. I believe that this question is linked to the most potent and complicated image presented in the penultimate section of the poem, where the mother seemingly selfishly, selflessly eats the who says that? Selfishly eats the sour green half of an apple and poisons the second person, you, with a sweet hop. Okay. Initially, this can be read as an attack on the alluded evil mother who simply hates her child. However, the mother is suffering here from eating an immature sour apple. The image is further complicated by the presence of both sweet and sour in the same apple. Maybe this symbolizes a situation that has multiple possibilities that only the mature adult can experience. The reader here, if sufficiently mature and perhaps responsible for others themselves, might detect the idea that selfless actions are not always appreciated by those who are immature to the true circumstances of some situations. It is therefore significant, it's a bit of a cheap phrase there, isn't it, that while the voice declares that we should not trust the mother, the colloquial reference to an inch perhaps urges us to ignore and challenge maturity of this voice and instead to question why the voice is so mistrusting of mothers. Anyway, okay. So 25 minutes there. How many words do we have there? I do appreciate I type faster somewhat than other people could do so. Okay, so here we go. So here we go. Let's read this then. So Lockhead presents motherhood as something both complicated and selfishly human. The title surprisingly flows with its jarring enjambment into the mother is always two-faced. Full stop outside of the quotation marks. This colloquial language seems to be childlike and therefore undermines the attempted authoritative tone of wisdom it is presumably establishing. The voice is presumably attempting to establish. So in order to understand that, you need to understand the context of statements and poems can be seen as an attempt to establish an authority over what is being presented or discussed. This tone, okay, so looking at the form, foreshadows in structure the attack on motherhood that the poem appears to be on the first reading. However, the poem exclaims yes to acknowledge that mothers have to pay a physically painful price for motherhood. The sensual imagery represented in the repeated similes, referring to the stark colours of red and white, show how there is a naive innocence perhaps expected of mothers, and that maybe the passion and danger of red blood symbolises the innate human interests of mothers that is meant to be subsumed when motherhood is attained. Okay, maybe here you could do with a semicolon or a full stop. This reading is given further credibility by focusing on the emotional adverb crazily, when the mother metaphorically bargains with fate. Whether it's causing mother to be two-faced is clearly something that involves being in an altered state of being. Altered state of mind, maybe. Altered state of mind, at least to the voice in the poem. This altered state of being, this altered psyche, is developed later in the poem by the connection to the strange reference to the mother dying early. You can say to the strange reference mother dying early, something she is always prone to do, which highlights that this is a metaphorical death perhaps. This allusion to folktale mothers who abandon their children is a complication of the diligent mother role that is expected by both children and society at large. Indeed, the proper noun reference, worst mother, seems to take this offensive superlative and sardonically mock this implicit criticism of mothers who are either perhaps not perfect for their children or who dare to have self-interest outside of motherhood. The two lines placed after the criticism of mother, jealous and casket, contrast the flowing, irregular structure so far throughout the poem. Given that the immature voice established at the start and heart of the poem has been railing against mothers without given structure, perhaps symbolizing the poet's implicit criticism of the ignorant and incoherence of such thoughts. Well, is that clear? Given that the immature voice established at the heart and start of the poem, I know it's reversed and I've done that twice, but that's probably because of what I'm reading it as, has been railing against mothers without a given structure, perhaps symbolizing the poet's implicit criticism of the ignorant incoherence of such thoughts. I really think that should be in brackets. These two lines, it's not entirely grammatical. These two lines, self-contained lines, therefore seem to portray that the voice is maybe scrabbling for understanding as to why mothers should be so poorly considered. It is an emotional attack rather than an intellectual one. This undermining of the voice attacks on motherhood seemed to resolve again in a final rambling rhetorical question about why children are treated as wolf bait. Again, a childish colloquial image, perhaps intended to suggest that the poet does not agree with the voice's attitude. I believe that the poet does not agree with the voice. No, that this question is linked to the most potent and complicated image presented in the penultimate section of the poem, where the mother seemingly selfishly eats the sour green half of an apple and poisons the second person you with the sweet pulp. Initially, this could be read as an attack on the eluded evil mother who simply hates her child. However, the mother is suffering here from eating an immature sour apple. The image is further complicated, which symbolizes the maturity of the child. The image is further complicated by the presence of both sweet and sour in the same apple. Maybe this symbolizes a situation that has multiple possibilities that only the mature adult can experience or perceive. The reader here, if sufficiently mature and perhaps responsible for others themselves, might detect the idea that selfless actions are not always appreciated by those who are mature to the true circumstances of some situations. It is therefore significant that while the voice declares that we should not trust the mother, the colloquial reference to an inch perhaps urges us to ignore and challenge the immaturity of this voice and portrayal and manifesto, and instead to question why the voice is so mistrusting of mothers anyway. And instead question. Okay, so missed opportunities, not massively that I can see. I think I maybe sort of prioritize the poet's possible attitude from there. Maybe could have thought of some themes of mother-child relations. Overall, reasonably pleased with this. Okay, hope that's useful. Enjoy this. Okay, so there we go.